You're here for poo, pain, and prana. And these are topics, let's say, that are very dear to my heart. I'll spend a little bit, like a third of the time of each, talking about them, and yet they're all interrelated. And so I've mentioned thus far a little bit about my specialties. Most of the work I do is based off of something called natural hygiene, which is the backbone of all really natural health. It goes back, way back to even before Ayurveda, which is Indian medical science, or classical Vedic science, I should say. It goes back to something called nature cure, which is what I've studied, amongst other things, in India. And it's using the earth and elements and balance to heal us. More than anything, it's instigating the body's own healing potential to self-heal. And so this is something that you're familiar with, whether you know it or not. If you've ever gotten a cut, or like before I came here tonight, something got in my eye and it turned all red. And all I did was close my eye and my eye started watering. It was self-healing. Just like when you have a cut, it's going to start to repair. When you break a bone, the doctor doesn't do anything but set it and put a cast on it. And it heals itself. And so if you can see this healing at the macroscopic level, then you can assume that it's also happening at the microscopic level, which it is. And that's what our body is doing at all times, throughout all days, every day. It's essentially getting rid of the old and bringing in the new. It's repairing, it's healing. And so with this, we have a potential to be able to instigate or awaken or ignite this healing energy. And the way that we do that is simply by stopping all of the tasks or the problems or the problem-solving activities of the body that take time. And so one of the biggest ones is digestion. And all of the science of fasting is based on the understanding that up to 70% of all available energy goes to digestion at any one time. And you guys know this because you felt it. This is reflected by blood flow to the central gastrointestinal canal. And so after you have a really big meal, how do you feel? Yeah, exactly. My example, mi ejemplo, it's normally the Spanish, right? They have an institution for this. It's called siesta. After everyone has a giant lunch, they go home and sleep for a few hours before going back to work. And so that essence of understanding that digestion itself takes a lot of energy is something we can all acknowledge as humans. Well, the reverse of that is that when we stop digesting, and so that would be going into a period of what's called fasting. We stop taking in solid fibrous matter. We allow the digestive system to greatly rest. Or we do different kinds of cleansing activities or diets. Like, let's say you want to eat just fruit for a week. After that, your body will have much more time to repair. It will have spent less time on digestion. You see that? Mm-hmm. And because of that, you'll see more healing. So if you want to feel vital, if you want to heal, if you want no pain or inflammation in your body, if you want to poo more, right? The answer is always, always, always to simplify. Simplify your intake. The fastest digesting foods are fruits and vegetables. Right? They're the most recognizable by the body, and that is the one undisputed dietary claim, that fruits and vegetables are good for you. You've heard that. That's not news. And so that is my actual dietary advice to people. I don't really talk in depth too much, except in advanced courses. Beyond that, I say eat more fruits and vegetables. Whatever you think more is, 3 times that. Yeah. And when you fill your diet with mostly fruits and vegetables and less of anything else, all of a sudden everything works better because the body has spent less time digesting foods that are not meant for the body. Right? So we'll dive in just with that kind of theme into the poo, the pain, and the prana, and start to see where they come from and where they go. Prana, I won't necessarily talk about too much because it'll be woven into everything, but in general, prana is the Indic term or the Vedic term for our healing life force energy. And every culture throughout the world has a name or a term for this healing energy. You've probably heard of chi from the Chinese arts, or ki from Japan, manna from Hawaii. All over the world there are different terms. So with prana, right, that is what I talked about when I referred to time, the body having time. Well, time and energy are actually the same thing. Yeah. So what we spend our energy on, what we spend our time on, what our body does the same physiologically, how it spends. So with that said, getting into poo. Some things that aren't normally known, and I'll share another bias of mine before I go too much further, that I have a career in colon hydrotherapy, and I teach colonics trainings now. Colon hydrotherapy is a washing out of the large intestine, the colon, goes around here. And so I have seen lots of poo in my time. Okay? And by seeing what comes out, I can understand how things are put in, how they work or don't work in the body, and then how much comes out or what doesn't come out. And this often indicates to me a very clear, bigger picture about someone's health. So I've learned a lot through that experience and investigations and pairing it with fasting and herbs and making really, truly hundreds of experiments. And so through that work, I've also come to learn and understand what normal means. And normal is healthy. It's not what is the norm in the modern world. Does that make sense? Because clearly what's the norm in the modern world is that people are very unhealthy. So a lot of the work I do is also based upon the understanding, very clear understanding, that the 5 most prevalent maladies or illnesses of our time, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, autoimmune diseases, and obesity, are all not only completely preventable, but they're actually pausable and reversible through diet and lifestyle changes. And so the diet and lifestyle changes that I talk about address those, and that work was led largely through Cornell University and a teacher of mine, Colin T. Campbell, as well as many other, let's say, revolutionary MDs in the United States and elsewhere who are using diet and lifestyle to reverse disease. So we have a lot to learn with what we were taught when we were kids, let's say. And this is the kind of topic or subject matter that I bring up in my talks. And so the first topic of poo is one that we have to be really honest about because we tend to be taboo. Yeah. One of my missions is to make poo less taboo. And so something that we weren't taught in school is that human beings are actually meant to be pooping once per meal per day. Something comes in, something goes out, just like babies, just like dogs. It's super logical. Yeah. And so embracing and fully understanding this process is crucial to us getting back in terms of normal and healthy. Often it's just a switch in people's mind. A lot of people that I've discovered, they say, oh, I thought I was only supposed to poop once a day. I tried not to poop more than that because I thought that was what was normal and things like this. So just talking about it, bringing it out into the open, and really giving people permission to poop is quite crucial and important. All right? So because people don't poop 3 times a day, what we end up resulting in or dealing with is the fact that there's a large amount of congestion or constipation held in people's body. And so this will reflect all throughout the body. It's not only about the digestive tract, it definitely is through the other end of the digestive tract if people have halitosis or bad breath. This is a need for cleansing or detoxification. If there's any kind of swelling in the belly area or any excess weight anywhere here, this is an indication that the body's holding on to something that it needs to let go of, and it's far beyond fat cells. Yeah. If there's any kind of backup in the body, and so that's like flakiness, corners of the eyes, head, whatever it is, if there's any kind of, let's say, excess oil or things like this, of course, constitutionally, more people will be prone to it than others, but in general, these are signs of congestion. Another big one is mucus. That's mucus in the nose, mucus in the throat, mucus in the stool, right? Any kind of unnecessary discharge from anywhere in the body. This is the body distributing, displaying, and trying to get rid of congestion that's inside. And so as human beings in the modern world walk around super, super congested, it's only a matter of time before the body has no more energy to keep it floating and illness develops. And so medical science thankfully now has admitted that cancer develops in the human body up to 20 years before it's ever seen in a clinical setting. And so what is cancer 20 years before? congestion, right? It's toxicity.
Yeah.
And so our number one method of output of congestion, of relieving congestion, is pooping.
Yeah.
And so it's so super clear that this is where we start. This is where we start. And so now that I've given you the very bad news, I'll give you some good news, or some path forward, and that is how to poop more. And so it's a list that I have all my students all over the world make, how to poop more. Number one is hydration. So something else that we don't know is that we're meant to be drinking roughly around 3 liters of water on average per day. Slightly proportional, but 3 liters is way more than most people drink. And that's water. That's not sugary drinks, that's not coffee, that's not even herbal tea, that's water. The kind of water we're meant to be drinking is natural mineral spring water. And so water also has to be drunk on an empty stomach, or else it doesn't count. And so there are all these little idiosyncrasies that we're just not taught, and yet in the natural world it's obvious. You won't see an animal drinking out of a pond, going and eating some mango from a tree, and then going back and drinking out of a pond, and then going. That's just not how things work. It's one thing at a time. If we can think of our digestive system a little more like a conveyor belt, and a little less like a big melting pot of a bunch of things together, it will start to work better, because we'll treat it more simply. And so, first way to poop more, hydration, water on an empty stomach, 3 liters a day. I recommend up to 1 liter slowly sipped before you even think about breakfast in the morning. And that, if nothing else, will start to stimulate the digestive tract. Because a big reason of constipation is that there are rocks, or there's a hardness to the stool. Not only because the food people are eating is dehydrated, but they are dehydrated. The amount of time that the poo spends in the colon, the large intestine, is much longer than it should, because people aren't pooping as often as they should. And so it dries out what comes. Does that make sense? It's this whole paradigm working against us, and yet all we have to do is start to shift it and start to change it. Number one way to poop more is hydration. Number 2 way, I'll give you a demo. Squat. Squat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so malasana on the toilet. Yeah. You can also get a little stool. Lots of different companies now still.
You mean squat? Like you mean on the...
On the toilet rim, yeah. You can put up the seat and squat on the toilet rim. There are also stools that you can buy to put your feet up on. Go ahead. And the position, squatting, what it does is it puts the large intestine, the colon, into a very supported stance. So it's held up by skin tags here. If you have your thighs up against the body, then it's going to support the large intestine. And then the rectum, the anal canal, it goes from being like that to straight up and down. When it's straight up and down, it's easier for things to move. And because of the muscular activity as well, it helps for the body's contraction to release. Okay? So I say to people, make squatting as much a part of pooping as is pulling down your pants.
Because that's probably the animal natural way.
Exactly,
Right?
100%. Yeah. And so if it becomes habit like that, you wouldn't poop without pulling down your pants, let's hope. Don't poop without squatting. And so with anything I say, don't believe me, verify me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you'll likely find good results.
Yeah, no, it's true. I do it.
Very good.
It's because also, I don't know, maybe that's what you were talking about when I went there, but like your body is, yeah, I thought so.
So from there, we'll go ahead to talk about the number 3 way to poop more. Number 3 way to poop more, it's a big one. It's very subtle. It's to give yourself time. To make time. To go to the toilet when you don't even think you have to. And squat there. Get your mind off of things. You can look at your phone. And as soon as the mind is distracted, the body knows exactly what to do. My analogy is, as the prison guard leaves, the prisoners can escape.
But then do you think there's like times in the day when you should do that?
Great question, yeah. So pooping first thing in the morning.
Yeah. But that one I think it's easy.
My best friend says it's colon o'clock. He's woken up by his need to poop. So we should be evacuating first thing in the morning because the body's been preparing all throughout the night. So yeah, first thing in the morning, and then normally maybe later on, depending upon how hydrated you are, whether that's before or after breakfast, but later on in the morning is another good time. And then sometime in the afternoon, it's normally when you give yourself time. If you haven't pooped a third time in the day, then I ask people to go and squat on the toilet for 10 minutes before they'll go to bed. And that doesn't have to be right before they go to sleep. It can be after dinner, 9 p.m., whatever it is. In general, the muscular action that moves through the entire digestive tract is called peristalsis. It's this wave-like motion. And as it moves through and moves everything out, when you eat something,
it starts
the process to eliminate something. Yeah. And so
is it, sorry to interrupt you, but then is it just normal that I have a small niece now, and every time after she eats, she wants to go to the
that's
toilet?
wonderful.
That's supernatural.
Kids are so important. It's so important to encourage kids' pooping habits.
Yeah.
So around the age of 7, a different, let's say, consciousness sets into a child's life, and they become much more self-conscious and self-censoring. And that's the time where we also see constipation greatly rise. And I remember being a constipated kid. I remember having all of this self-consciousness. And it's so important that if you, it doesn't even have to be your own kid. If you have nieces and nephews or your friends' kids, to talk to them about poop, to make them comfortable, to make it normal, because this is literally, along with hydration, the #1 thing that you can do to revolutionize their entire life. Their entire life, not only their physical health, because the fact of the matter is that when we're constipated, we're also upset and crabby and mean to people. When we're congested, our life is congested. And so this clarity and this natural cleansing that we need will infiltrate all parts of life. And drinking and pooping are hand in hand. Okay? So, very good. I think that concludes our poo part of the lecture. But we can come back to it if anything else comes. But from there, we'll move into talking about pain, because it's along the same theme of congestion. So what is pain? Pain in the body is a signal or a sensor through the neurological pathways that something hurts. Often it's associated with a host of other, what Western medicine would call symptoms, and what I would actually call healing responses or healing crises. For example, inflammation. So let's say someone breaks their arm. Immediately it starts to swell. Well, that swelling is the body's healing response. Because what is it? It's blood, right? More blood flow to the area, bringing life force energy in oxygen. Oxygen is healing. We know this through the experiments done right now with hyperbaric chambers. You're familiar? They're heightened oxygenized chambers that athletes and all kinds of competitive athletes, along with, there's work done experimentally with veterinary medicine that they'll put whoever's injured or ill into this chamber, and this healing process is so much speedier or rapid. The body's own self-repair, prana, is heightened. And so the body does this naturally through the process of inflammation. The thing is that today, we are injuring ourselves, we could say, more than we ever have before. And that's not only injuring ourselves in terms of like breaking of arms or developing cancer, that's also injuring ourselves in terms of eating things that we're not meant to be eating. And you might say, well, what does that mean? I eat cheesecake and I'm injuring myself? That's not correlated in our modern mind. But the thing is that anything that we put into the body that's been processed, that has chemicals or additives or preservatives, maybe if it was genetically modified or if it was traditionally something that wasn't meant for human consumption, all of a sudden when it's put in the body sees it as a foreign object, which makes sense, and thus labels it or declares it as toxicity or poison. And so it has to go through the cleansing process to try to get it out. Well, when we continually put the toxic or poison element, I'm being intentionally vague here, right? Because we can talk about anything from like a piece of swallowed chewing gum, which I think everyone would admit is not something that belongs in the body, to, again, something like a processed packaged cheesecake.
Or milk.
Sure, that's a whole other discussion and perhaps a lecture for another day. But with these two examples, when they come into the body, essentially the body doesn't know how to handle them. And so what ends up happening is there's a tremendous amount of blood flow to the digestive tract, lots of swelling, and because of the swelling, the colon or the small intestine, respectively that or that size in diameter, will all of a sudden get thinner. And so going back to poo, sometimes people have pencil-thin poos. Well, this is why, because they have a swollen colon because of whatever they've eaten or consumed. And so with that swelling, the more blood flow to the area, all of a sudden the body's only trying to heal itself, but then you're causing it to need to heal itself every day. So people almost everywhere in the modern world are walking along with what I call low-level autoimmune disorders. There's a low level of chronic inflammation in the body at all times. And so what does this result as? This can result as anything from a sore back, sore neck, headaches even, blood flow to the brain, pounding head, things like that. It can result as a sore knee or a tennis elbow. It can result in just feeling kind of crinkly. Oh, I'm getting old, people say. This coupled with dehydration, which most people everywhere are dehydrated. And it's not only that they're not having the 3 liters for today, it's also that they didn't have the 3 liters from yesterday or the day before or for the 35 years before that or 65 years before that. And so they're in massive, massive debt of hydration. On top of that, they're having tremendous amounts of salt or processed foods or dried foods like crackers or cookies or bread where there's absolutely no water and there's a tremendous condensation of fiber. And so it requires water from the body to rehydrate the food and push it through. Does that make sense? Yeah? So it's crazy how dehydrated people are today. When you throw in alcohol and coffee into the paradigm, super dehydrating liquids, all of a sudden, yeah, you're going to have sore joints, a sore back, a headache. It's absolutely no surprise. So a mark of a healthy body that not many people have today is a body with very, very, very few ailments. It's a body that someone knows when something flares up, they know exactly why. Right? Whether that's eating or drinking or sleeping, or what's happened. What is the psychosomatics behind it? What is the correlation with something emotional in your life that caused the manifestation to happen there, or here, or wherever it is? And the entire body has been mapped throughout systems, throughout time, from the Mayan tradition to the Japanese tradition, anything from facial diagnosis to meridian lines in Chinese medicine. There is meaning behind everything. Even each one of your teeth correlates to a part of the body and is reflexed there. You're familiar with reflexology on the hands and the feet? And as well, we have different parts of the colon or different parts of the eye that are all associated. Throughout each of the spinal vertebrae, one of the organs is innerved. And so as one thing comes out of line, it could manifest somewhere else in the body. And that's holistic medicine in a nutshell. It's saying that I cannot have an ear, eyes, and nose and throat specialist. It's simply impossible. Because actually, nothing's wrong with my nose. The problem is down in my toes. And so when we understand pain beyond the normal context, when we see that all of the associations with pain are likely from a different underlying cause, we can trace it back to congestion, the constipation, poo not happening, because if the body had more time to constantly clean itself and clear itself easily, then it would repair all of the painful points. Right? If we were hydrated, then we would be pooing and the pain perhaps wouldn't come as easily. And the way that I know this is because when I bring people into fasting retreats, and I've fasted thousands of people all over the world, right, through juice cleanses or other types of fasts, all of a sudden we get to day 5, day 6, and that neck pain that they've had for literally 20 years is gone. Or that wrist that's given them arthritis for the past decade doesn't hurt. Because when we undergo a process of fasting, it's intensive healing. We're using prana, sending it back into the body, life force energy redirected in to repair. All of a sudden, all those places that are chronically inflamed, they're fine. The inflammation goes away because there's nothing that's causing it. We're not giving our body something to always heal through eating improperly. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So inflammation in the body is one of the greatest indicators of health, your level of inflammation or lack thereof. And you'll notice, you'll feel it in your body. And there is a chronic point at which someone can be very thin and very frail and still have sensitive joints, and that's often because that person is so severely dehydrated over several decades. And so the first thing we need to do is rehydrate, and the way to do that is by undergoing some kind of cleansing program. And so that's often my offerings, as I host cleansing or fasting retreats. And so this is what I have next week here in Amsterdam, is people are going to come and they're going to stop eating. They're taking in solid fibrous matter. So all of the energy, instead of going to digesting, will go to healing cleanse. And through that time, pains go away, people feel great. And then after that time, as they go back into their normal lifestyle, they eat fruits and vegetables largely. And they see when they add other things in if their problems come back.
What about if you have, well, in my case, I don't eat processed foods. I think almost nothing. Once in a while maybe, but it's not, and for a couple of years already, and I do drink water, and so if you do already have this good diet, let's say, and you still have sores and stuff like that.
Yeah, so it's a really great time, sorry to interrupt you.
Fine.
Did I understand your question? Yeah? It's a really great time to try out some kind of cleansing, because it's often only when our body gets time to cleanse that we understand really how good we can feel. And that's when I said to you at the beginning that I deal with people's aliveness and I awaken a certain essence of vitality in them. That's what I work with. I show people how much better they can feel. I take people who think they're healthy and show them how much healthier they could be. And so the lifestyle part of it, in terms of diet and hydration specifically, it's just a part. Right? It's also what we think, it's also how we move, it's a much bigger paradigm. And so often, and there are idiosyncrasies, there are specificities within the diet. It's not only what you eat, it's how you eat it together, it's when you eat it, it's how much you chew, it's what soil that food was grown in. Right? It's very, very deep and complex. However, in answering your question, you would need to go into an intensive hydrating, cleansing experience so that your body could start to stir up anything that's been suppressed. So when I said that sometimes there are people who are thin, you wouldn't see the inflammation, but there's still pain. That's often because it's been so chronic, it's so much time that it's been there. There's also a factor of dehydration, that the result is that you're doing all of the healthy things and yet it's not working. And so that kind of person would need to come into a cleansing process to stir things up, because when it becomes chronic, the body has stopped fighting back. That's why there is no inflammation. You see? And so we need to bring it into a healing space or a cleansing space that stirs things up and brings out a little bit of inflammation so that it can then again wash through. And the wash through part is really important because we do need to be drinking all of our water, and when we're not eating, it's much easier to drink water. And so my people during the cleansing retreats actually just end up rehydrating a lot of the time.
And is it better to have more frequent meals than less meals and bigger? Or does it really matter?
So, I mean, a meal doesn't mean anything, and also the idea of 3 square meals a day is something that is invented by the U.S. Agricultural Association. It's not something that is ever prescribed. You don't see monkeys going around saying, I think I'm going to have breakfast now.
So we're kind of designed probably to be constantly eating instead of just...
Yeah, it's much more adaptable, let's say. But now we've adapted our eating scale to the modern human life, where we have work and before and after. And we do eat way more and way more often than we're meant to. And in that simplicity, so when you say a large volume, it's like, what are we eating? Because the thing is that you can eat a very small volume of very concentrated foods. For example, a cheeseburger. Right? So we don't even need to talk about the calories, but the meat has been ground and then put together into a patty. Right? So it's very, very condensed, given as well. Animal protein and flesh is very condensed. And then the cheese tons of calories condensed into a piece or two, depending on what country you're having a cheeseburger in. And then the bread is a bunch of flour that's been condensed. All the water's been taken out. It's been put on there. So you see?
Yeah.
It's very condensed food. So your cheeseburger, which is here, would be the caloric equivalent of 3 watermelons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which are like here. And I would eat those all during the day. And so the amount of time that we spend eating, the size or the quantity of what we're eating, it's completely dependable upon what we're eating. What you can always ask yourself is how much water is in the food. So I have to post, a good friend of mine made an experiment. He made a video or a picture of his salad that he had, and he and I both eat huge salads, like salad bowls that big. And he put it all in a blender, he took out all the water, and then he dehydrated it, and it ended up being like 2 small crackers.
Yeah.
And so people say, you eat so much food.
Yeah.
And I say, yeah, but it's all water. It's 95% water. And so when you're eating way more fruits and vegetables, and when that's mostly what you're eating, and less of everything else, you're going to have to eat more. So more frequently, let's see, there is definitely an inherent goodness behind something that's becoming much more popular in the world of today called intermittent fasting. And so you've heard of this?
Yep.
Intermittent fasting is leaving usually somewhere around 16 hours or so with the digestive system roughly turned off. And so if you stop eating dinner at, let's say, 8 p.m., then you won't eat again until 12 noon the next day. There's 16 hours where you're not eating, and then a period of 8 hours between noon and 8 that you are eating. And so whether you're eating 2 or 3 times during that, it depends on what you're eating and how you're eating it. But in general, it's condensing the amount of time, actual hours in the day that your digestive system has to be up and active, specifically the upper digestive tract in relation to the stomach itself, and then giving it rest the rest of the time. Because as the body gets rest, that's time for the body to heal.
Yeah.
The pain goes away, our digestive system works more effectively, we're pooping more. And the prana, or the life force energy, the vitality that runs through our veins, is much more accessible. And so that's what I'm here to do, is empower people to awaken this life force energy.
And if you do, let's say, start doing this intermediate fasting, for instance, how long do you have to do it for before you start noticing a change?
Oh, immediately.
Immediately.
You'll notice immediately, yeah. Yeah. I worked a very crazy job. I've just moved here from Bali, Indonesia. I used to work a job where I would sometimes work 16-hour days, be teaching huge classes, seeing tons of clients, running programs all in one day. And in that, I knew that without my fasting practice, I would not have been able to survive. Because if I did the normal person thing and went and had a big breakfast, I would be so tired and sluggish for my whole morning.
Yeah.
But my whole morning would go until 2 or 3 p.m. maybe, and I wouldn't eat anything. And I would be so high-powered because all my vitality would be going to my aliveness rather than going to my digestive tract.
Yeah.
But it's been a years of a process to attune my body to work in that way. And so it's becoming much more popular in the modern world now. People are obsessed with this word ketosis, which is the body going into fueling itself off of fat rather than off of sugar. And so we are meant to run off of sugar. Human beings at large, we are frugivorous by biological nature, biomechanical nature, really. We are meant to be eating the fruits and leafy greens of above ground plants in their natural state.
Yeah.
We share more than 96% of our DNA with our close cousins, the chimpanzees and the other great apes. And if you go into a zoo and you ask a zoologist, what do the great apes eat? What do you feed them here? So it would be like their natural environment. They say tremendous amount of fruit and young, sweet, tender greens. That's it. Sure, they have insects every month sometime, but that's it. And so the thing is that we are still way, way, way more similar to that species of animals than we've ever been different. And so when we return more towards that natural diet, all of a sudden our body has more time to heal. and we're better. And so your question was specifically about how soon do you see the changes?
Yeah, it was, but it's more like, because there's a lot of things that you say that I've always, for instance, naturally, I never was able to eat breakfast, like
yes,
wake up and eat, and I always drank a lot of water in the morning, and then until, I don't know, 11 or 12, and then I can eat.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that you're talking about that I do normally, and because I also, regarding to eating, I've always listened to my body somehow. I don't know, it was not a conscious thing, but if I don't feel like eating, I don't, not because it's time to eat. So, yeah, I'm just trying to kind of organize the information you're giving into what I already do or know.
And a lot of times, people like you who are intuitive about health, I guess you would have Virgo somewhere in your astrology chart. You would probably have Virgo somewhere in your astrology chart.
I have no idea.
This intuition, society is telling you to go against, right? Because you've been told that breakfast is the most important thing in the day, and you have to be getting all this stuff, and yet intuitively you know otherwise. Just like children as well, intuitively know otherwise. So good. We have just a few more minutes if anyone has any other questions.
I don't know. Let me think if it comes up.
No, it's okay. I'll just summarize. If we can weave together the elements of poo and pain and prana, we see that this pattern develops because as we have congestion in the body, because we're not flushing as much as we need to, we're putting things in that aren't meant to go in. It's like a square peg in a round hole. It's not going to fit. Things get stuck. So as we have stuckness or congestion in the body will have more frequent pain. The pain response of inflammation then happens chronically. Over time, the body stops responding. Right? Or you take so many anti-inflammatories, right? An Advil a day, or whatever it is, or you have surgery, or some other kind of non-natural intervention, that over time, the constipation, which was the original alarm bell that we ignored, sometimes even from the age of 7, it doesn't go off. And so now at the age of 47 or 37 or even 27 sometimes today, it develops into more chronic disease, whatever that may be, if it's fibromyalgia or if it's ovarian cancer. And so all of this has its root in the simplicity of hydration and elimination. There are integral parts here that I didn't talk about, like the need for rest, the need for the parasympathetic nervous system or the relaxation response to be exhibited, and the need for cleansing in the diet, lots of green to be able to wash through the bloodstream and detoxify. And so because of all of this, because we are not living a natural life, all of a sudden pain comes out, disease develops, and we are very disconnected from the third part, which is prana, which is the life force healing energy. Our body simply has no time to self-repair as it would normally if we were living a much more natural life. So there we have it.
So do we have any means to measure what our current state is? Or how,
I love it.
Actually, if we have something to change, how can we identify if we're doing the right, if we're following the right patterns, basically?
For sure. So I do a lot of diagnosis. This is good. I don't normally get a question like this. I do a lot of diagnosis, and I can see someone standing there, and because of training in all of those reflexology arts and things like that I said, I can see lots of things that are out of balance. Iridology is the study of the iris of the eye, which has a map. It's like if you put the Vitruvian Man in the eye, you would see one side, the other side. You would see what's called tissue integrity through the body. So tissue integrity is literally the innervation or the function level between brain and body part, how functioning it is. Or if somehow the tissue integrity, the innervation, the connection to that part of the body has been deadened, and thus that part of the body will not function as well. And I also see in the eye, I see how much acidity is there. So the pH balance in the body is visible, roughly in the blood. Every part of the body has a different pH. And then there's also an essence of layers of toxicity.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at this and you already know.
Well, I would have to see your eye up close, but that's at the microscopic level, right? Because we're talking about tissues, although with a microscope I can see pretty easily. However, it's much more than this lifetime because you were born with DNA from your parents and you've inherited toxicity from several generations back. And so what we see now with my current field, which is epigenetics, above genetics, beyond our DNA, we can see that we have the potential then to cleanse throughout our lifetime. And so effectively what this means is that through the decades, it's been one so far, so through the decade, my eyes are getting lighter. So currently my eyes are orange. Genetically, my eyes are blue. And so I inherited, I was born with a lot of toxins that I've had to detoxify through the years. Check back with me in 20 or 30 years. They might likely be blue. You see, so it takes time to detoxify.
So brown eyes are like...
So brown eyes with brown skin, right? Or with East Asian, Sub-Saharan African, this kind of thing. For Caucasian people, and not all Caucasian people, because who knows, you could have some kind of Siberian ancestry or some kind of Moorish ancestry, wherever it is, wherever you come from. There would be an interfusing, and you could have genetically brown eyes. I can look at your eyes when we see it. But me, right? My ancestry is Eastern European, and my eyes are genetically blue. And you can see that when you look close, that there isn't this dark brown, that the tissues are visible. So this is one way, definitely, undeniably, to diagnose. But it's also when I look at someone, you can see through the toning of their musculature. It's not only how much they go to the gym. It's also the amount of inflammation in the body, because someone who goes to the gym too much is going to have a ton of inflammation in the body. So the body should be really well proportioned. The biggest thing for me that's an indicator of someone's health is the strength of their diaphragms. And so there are three main diaphragms in the body. There's the pelvic floor. So that's a diaphragm that's very weakened, especially in women. There's the actual breathing apparatus diaphragm, often also very weakened because people today breathe very minimally and shallowly. That doesn't mean that we have to breathe more. It simply means our breath should be much longer and more expansive and filling to all parts of the lungs. And then the diaphragm in the throat, so the tone of someone's voice actually tells a lot to me about their entire being. So this is one level of diagnosis. But also seeing any kind of discharge in the body, understanding like the color of their tongue, things like this. There's so many diagnostic points about health.
Yeah, it's really amazing.
So, and I mean, it comes down to psychosomatics, which is something that I study a lot. It's the relationship between disease and what happens. It's a different lecture that I give. It's what I think I gave one during the festival here. Mm-hmm. But the understanding that whatever is going on in our psyche will manifest in our body. So, for example, I was in a workshop last week, and there was a girl who, believe it or not, was a medical doctor. Right? Those are the ones that are often, they ignore themselves the most. Yeah. And her whole jaw was like this, and she talked like this. And so that's telling me that there's a sidedness in the body, that there's probably something held. Like, you tend to grind your teeth when you're stressed. It could have gone back as far as childhood. And so when we see anything appearing in the body like this, it's a clear indicator that there's something below hidden. And it's never just physical. No. So when I'm looking at someone and diagnosing it, it's the bigger picture. It's everything. Does that answer?
Yes.
Yeah? For shallow realms, you can get a blood test. It'll just tell you if anything's out of the norm of the unhealthy human society. But what we're doing is cellular medicine. It's much deeper than just the levels reported in a CBC.
Yeah, but what you can see actually in those tests is not really... I mean, because it's so standardized that yeah, I don't think it helps so much in the end.
Helps. If they always come back positive, then you can say, look, they come back fine.
Yeah, but
I'm healthy.
but like in a
I agree with you.
groundbreaking level, you know?
Let's break ground.
Yeah.
Let's break ground.
So if you change your habits, do you actually start seeing benefits very rapidly? Is it something, or you need some?
It depends on you. It's because it's more
Understandable.
emotional than it is physical. Your body is ready to be healthy today, not tomorrow, today. Your body is fully capable of healing itself right now. It's just a matter of really our emotional sphere in changing diet and lifestyle, because it is swimming upstream. It's not normal.
Yeah.
How prepared are you for that?
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, often going slower helps. So, I mean, if you're talking specifically about like diet stuff, obviously what I'm saying and what I advocate and what the research shows as well is that a plant-based diet is a diet that promotes health, and that a processed or an animal-based diet is a diet that promotes disease. Right? There's enough like solid fact to say that now. And so I'll just say from there that, okay, well, if we're going to go down that stream, there are different levels, right? There's like Meatless Monday is something that came to the world probably almost 10 years ago. And so one day a week you go without eating meat and you see how it is. From there, maybe someone starts to eat meat only a few times a month. From there, then someone starts to say, you know what, I'm living a vegetarian lifestyle, or pescatarian, right? At the time when I was vegetarian, I remember saying, I'll never be vegan. I wouldn't inconvenience myself that much. Those words came out of my mouth. And yet, it's little by little where what you think is impossible or too much now,
Then I think
5 years from now won't be.
Yeah.
So you just have to be honest with yourself, and you can never do anything because anyone outside of you says anything. Only true lasting change comes from inside.
Okay.
I think as well that if you start like eliminating things, like I'm a vegetarian, but it's not, or a pescatarian maybe, because sometimes I do eat fish, but it's been a long time already that I don't, because I just don't feel like it. Because you change your habits and then you can't go back. It's like...
Yeah, what was seen as food before no longer is seen as food.
Yeah.
And a lot of the work that I do is really hacking, or hacking into our cognition about why we think things. Because like I say cheesecake and people start to drool. And as much as I tell them that their body isn't going to process that, they still want it. And that's because of the condensed amount of calories and the classic pairing between fat and sugar that sends off a dopamine shot in the brain, which is the same reaction that happens when we snort cocaine.
Yeah.
And so if people are getting their dopamine shots from food, then they will always be addicted.
Yeah.
And so really the addiction to food is the last frontier of addiction. And this is a field that I'm working with much more now today as well. And cleansing or fasting or juice diets help tremendously with that.
Yeah.
Because quite often people, they're eating 3 meals a day every day and snacks, and they don't even realize that they can go for a few days without.
They don't know that it's like with stress. People don't know that they're addicted to stress. They have no idea how it works and how, it's really scary when I start to think about it, like,
all we can do is be kind, love people more, serve them some water, have some yoga.
For sure, but when you start to go